Hello, welcome to a little tutorial about customizable player models using Blockbench. Admittedly, I gotta admit, this is my second attempt at recording this video. I did not like the first attempt, did not want to edit it, didn't like it. So it's taken a bit for this to come out, so I apologize for that. However, this is somewhat of a continuation, more so an expansion on the first video I did. You can check it out, it goes into specifics about elytra textures for this, but we're going to talk a lot in depth on how customizable player models works as a mod, how it works on Blockbench, and more of my tips as a modeler on how to do things, and also just give a little bit of example and answer some questions that I got in the last video, because I got quite a few questions there. I'm hoping that this video will answer some of those. That's the aim of this, and hopefully I can give you a little bit more of a guide, so hopefully we can answer some questions and get things going. Before we do that, I gotta mention today's sponsor is me. I don't have a sponsor. However, I am an artist. I do commissions. If you like Minecraft skins, if you like what you see here for the different CPM models, if you like what you're seeing, and you're like, hey, this is a little bit too complex, I would prefer to get someone who's like a professional with this. I don't consider myself a professional. However, if you just want to commission someone to do this, I have those open on my VGen, and you can find that in the description if you would like to. Alright, now that that is done, let's discuss. So if you don't know anything about customizable player models, let me give you a little brief introduction. Customizable Player Models is a Fabric and I think Forge mod made by Tom5454. This allows for people to upload any sort of custom model they want into the game and will be visible if used on the public database for anyone to see across servers as long as they have the mod installed. I should note, even if you're changing a base texture, like let's say you're changing a texture of a cape or changing the texture of an elytra or armor, those will not appear to anyone without CPM. Even though it's like something that's base, already exists in the game, if someone else does not have CPM, they will not see your adjustments done through CPM. I hope that makes sense. The first thing we need to do so we can actually get this done is we have to download the plugin. So Blockbench itself does not have a built-in thing to do with CPM. However, Tom, the creator of the mod, does have a plugin that you can download for Blockbench to make it work. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into File with our settings. We're going to go to Plugins. We have a few buttons at the top. We are going to click this one, which is Download Plugin from URL. Now in the description, I'm going to have a link to a GitHub page, which you will find right here. And what you're going to do, right here it says how to install, we are going to highlight and copy this URL, and you're going to put it into Blockbench. You can hit confirm. So we are just going to go and make a new custom player model. Hit create model. So this is a little bit important for some reason, and I don't know this is something that's for everyone else's Blockbench, but it is a case for mine. Whenever I try to load a texture here, it will not load when I open the model. So we do not need to touch the texture. Texture size, we don't have to touch currently. We will touch later, but we do not have to touch currently. Model, it's going to be slim or default. The model that I'm going to be doing today is going to be using the Alex model, so I'm going to go with that. Literally, only difference is the standard shape of the model. So when you open up Blockbench, this is what you're going to see. This isn't like a super in-depth tutorial on how Blockbench itself works, but hopefully it will be a little bit of a tutorial on how to use this for customizable player models. So what we're going to do is we are going to change our skin texture, right? So we're going to hit change file. We're going to go to wherever we are storing our skin that we're going to use. And for this project, I'm going to just do a little bit of a skin for a character called Sokaku from Zenless Zone Zero. I'm not sponsored, I just play the game. We're going to be making this model, and this character has demon horns and a demon tail, has big ears, also has like a little mask thing that's on her side as well. So we're going to do modeling for all of those. So first things first, what we're going to do is add our second layer, because in most skins, if I click here, you can see that most skins we have a secondary layer. However, when you first make a CPM model, it's not going to show up. So I'm going to click CPM, add parts, add second layer. For me, this never works. I'm going to be honest. People have recommended it. Sometimes it's worked if I updated my thing. However, that does not work for me. So I'm going to show you what we're going to do. So how to do this, we are going to duplicate every single cube we have. And I'm going to rename these to what they're meant to be. So we have hat, body. Now what we're going to do is we're going to hit Control A. We're going to click all of these. We're going to hit UV mode per face UV. For when we're going to be modeling, it's going to be important to have our default UV mode to be per face UV. So what we're going to do We're gonna click here on our hat. First thing we're gonna do is go over to this element tab, right? So on this element tab, we have a few things here. Position, this will tell you where on the screen it is, where along our grid this block is. So size is gonna tell you how big the block itself is. Now this is important as well because the size has this other place called inflate. That's where it's gonna be important for getting our second layer. What we're gonna do is for the head specifically, we are going to change the inflate to 0.5. And then we're gonna take all this, we're gonna highlight all of our UV. We're gonna drag it over. Sometimes this will happen, just hit undo. And just reselect. Sometimes it's weird, I'll be honest. And there we go. We have our second layer for the head. So we have to do that, sadly, for each of these. However, the thing that's important to know about the body, the head is unique, where you're doing 0.5. The body, the arms, the legs, those are all going to be 0.25. Of course, this is if we're recreating how a regular Minecraft skin works. If you want things to be bigger, you want to be smaller, that's up to you. That's personal preference. I'm going to go ahead and get my top layer all fixed, and then I'll come back to you. Alrighty, so I have my top layer all fixed and set, and that means I can start making this into a model. So the first thing we're going to do, you can look here at our texture. You'll notice we don't have a lot of space to really do anything. Much like any sort of Minecraft mob texture, we have to add on pieces, which means we have to then add textures to those pieces, and those all need to be stored on this file. So what we're going to do, just for the future to save ourselves a headache, we are going to go into a program. I'd recommend a free program if it's an image editor. If you have Photoshop, I think you can use Photoshop. I'm honestly not sure. I recommend either Fire Alpaca or Medibang just because they're free. I'm gonna open up the Minecraft skin we're working on. What I'm gonna do is, since we're working on CPM, I'm gonna get rid of that. We're gonna make our canvas size 128 and we're gonna make it so that it's left aligned so it stays close to this edge. And that way it expands and gives us all the space right here. So you can save this as your CPM. What we can do is save as CPM, just add CPM onto the end. So we'll have a lot of extra space. And what we're gonna do now is we are gonna change this texture back on our UV here. We're gonna change this UV to be 128, hit confirm, and now everything gets mixed up. Don't worry. We're going to change our file to the file that we just made, and now everything's back to normal. So from here, I know there are things that are currently on this model, particularly in the head, that I want to add in the CPM, but I don't want them to be on the base model. Because what I want to focus on is I want to add the horns and the ears on the model. I don't have the tail on the model, so I don't need to worry about that. So because we have all these textures here that we don't want when we're working on this, because we want them to be modeled, what we're going to do is we're going to erase the textures. Because there is a texture editor within Blockbench. I don't think it can change image size, so that's why I recommend using an external program software. But we are then going to get rid of some opacity. We're going to go over our texture. It's a lot easier to know what you need to cover up if you made the texture. However, I also know that not everyone makes Minecraft skins. So just do your best to try and copy what texture was made. And as long as you go based on like what looks good on the skin and looks like it's natural, I think you'll be all right. I think that's all I wanted to add with that. So bring that back. And now that we have this at the ready, we can start modeling. So what I'm going to do first is we're going to focus on horns because I really enjoy modeling horns. I think they're lots of fun, so we're going to do that. I'm though quickly first going to grab myself a reference image because it's really important to have reference images when you're modeling. If you're going off of just what you want to make, you don't technically need one, but if you're doing something that's like trying to emulate something else, you definitely want a reference image. So how to add a reference image in CPM? What I'm going to do, so I'm going to hit copy on the image I want. We're going to go to right click on the background, on the back transparent background, and we're going to hit reference image from clipboard, add to this project. I'm going to move this over here and then click away. And then I can move this here, move it all around, and I'll just have this reference image here on the corner so that I know what I'm looking at. In the future, if you need to edit it, you can hit edit reference images and move it there, or show it and hide it as well. Alrighty, so let's get started on making some horns. So for me, whenever I'm making horns, the first thing I do is in the head group, I'm going to make a folder called horns. So why specifically do we need to have this here? Why can't we have it out here? I'm going to show you a little bit by just placing a cube in here. So if we have a cube out here, let's say this is how we're starting the horn. We have a cube right there. This is how our head moves. Our head will move straight from here. So if we just have our horns outside of this folder, the horns will not move with the head, which then will be a bit of a problem because how is it gonna go? How's it gonna move? So we need to make sure that when we're modeling, anything that we want to move with a certain body piece, it has to be within that body piece's folder. All right, so what we're gonna do is we are going to turn on mirror modeling, because if we're making horns, we want to make sure that we have horns on both sides. So what I'm gonna do is I'm first going to adjust the inflation on this to make it a little bit smaller. I'm gonna make it a -0.1. That's just a little bit smaller. It's not as big. Reset the pivot point. So the pivot point is where we're also going to get into this next part of the element section. The pivot point is where we rotate from. As you can see, if I click the pivot tool, that is basically where we will rotate from. That's where it will register we have to rotate from. As you can see with the head, our pivot point is right there on the neck. So it registers we have to rotate from that point on the neck. So we're gonna go back to this cube. I'm gonna rotate it a little bit like this because I want it to be kind of a little bit less very blocky. The way I tend to model isn't very in line with how Minecraft models look, where everything is very parallel. I like to, at least with horns, make them look a little bit more different. So I'm gonna resize this down to 1 pixel, bring it over here. Another thing when you're modeling is to understand how moving works, how everything on this works. So every time that we move with the arrow, as you can see, we have a little number by our cursor. It's showing us how far we've moved it. Anytime we just click down with our mouse, it's always going to move it by a full pixel. So 1, 2, 3, 4, always moving by a full pixel. To move by quarter pixel steps, we're going to hold down Shift, and then we start moving by 0.25s. Gives us a little bit more precise measure. If you want to be even more precise than that, we're going to hold down Control, and then we go by just general points. I tend to prefer to just stick to Shift, and if I have to, I'll go to the 0.5 section. A lot of modeling ends up being looking at what you make and seeing if you like the shape. Because honestly, that just ends up being most of what I do. If it's like, do I like how physically this looks? Is it more accurate? Sometimes, yes. However, sometimes I'm like, I want it to be a little bit smaller. Alrighty, so we're gonna wait until we do textures for these, but for now, we have a horn shape done. So next, back in our head, we're gonna make another group. We're gonna call this ears. I want her to have big ears like she has in game. So we're gonna pull out another cube, make sure we still have our mirror modeling on. Gonna resize this. Typically for these I go for a 2x2x1 block, just because I think it adds some shape. And then I add another little cube, pull it out. Gonna resize this. Let's go with that, because I think she's got pretty big ears. So we're gonna go with a bit longer of shape. From here, I'm also going to add another cube because she's got earrings. Yeah, I think that'll be good. So the reason why I'm adding this as just like one full block is that this cube set is going to be, the cube I have selected here is going to be transparent. So for now, I'm going to rename this to earring. And now, the last step for doing ears for me is we are going to make different folders for these. We're gonna have left ear and then right ear. Turn off mirror modeling for a little bit. We're gonna turn our earring, the cube's on that side. So we're gonna grab this cube, and then the rest of these can go into the right ear. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna move the pivot tool on these. I'm gonna turn back on mirror modeling. I'm going to move the pivot on this because I want my ears to sit a little bit closer to the head, a little bit further back so they aren't sticking out like this. Sometimes that's fun and goofy, but that's not the exact effect that I'm looking for. So I'm going to move them to this corner right here, and then I'm going to take my rotate tool, and I'm going to just rotate it backwards. They're a little more flat to the head. There we go. So now we have some little demon ears. So next we are going to model a tail. Now tails can be a little bit more complex on this. I gotta let you know. The reason why I'm gonna put some emphasis on how to do a tail is because when it comes to animation, you're gonna want to have your tail separated. Most Minecraft tails are just gonna be one really big stick like this, where they just stick it out and then rotate it, and they're like, yep, that's gonna be the wag. That's our tail wag. That's our tail. However, much like you'll find in most of this tutorial, I think that's boring. I think you can do better. So we're gonna do a little bit more complex of a tail. So I'm gonna make this into tail 1. Because our tail we're going to segment it into 3 parts to make sure that it has a little bit more sway, a little more swing to it, that it looks a little bit more realistic, because I think it's more fun. We want to make sure that when we're correcting a pivot for the tail, specifically, we want the tail pivot to be right there on the top of this cube right there. Because that way, when we rotate it, the end of it goes in. We're going to add a second group inside this one. We're going to call this tail 2. And then, when we have that piece, we can add another one. This will be tail 3. Well, before I do any of that, we're going to make sure that we have this tail pivot point where we want it to be. Because we want it to be here. That way, when it starts rotating, we start making this tail swing back and forth, we are not making it go a little crazy. For personal preference with me, when I'm doing little demon tails, I like to have them kind of have a little kink at the end. That way they got a little bit more character to them. And then we are going to add one last cube, and we're going to make this one flat. And we're going to move it in between here, right in the center. So this will be the barb end of our tail. Change this to spike. Most of the times when I'm just modeling, the only things I'm going to end up naming are things I know are small and I need to go back to. So if it's in its designated folder, I don't worry about it too much. Alrighty, so we have the bulk of our modeling done, and just because I'm going to do a little bit of a detail for this, so Kaku does have a little mask sometimes, so I'm going to model a little mask that's just going to sit on the leg right there. Since this isn't really a big part of the tutorial, I'm probably going to skim over it. I think you get the gist of it, where we're just making sure we pick which is the correct folder to model in. We add a group, we name it, we add some cubes. So I will come back to you soon. We got that shaped in. Something small. So what we're now going to do is we are going to make sure we have everything open that we've modeled. We're going to select all of our cubes. We're going to double check that everything's selected because it will have a purple outline. I think it'll be blue on your screen. I've adjusted my colors because I like them to be a little more purple. We're going to double check that everything we've modeled has this purple outline. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go over to our texture side and we are going to hit create texture. So this is where we're going to get a little bit into personal preference here. I personally enjoy having more high quality and high definition details with a CPM model. Some people prefer it to just be regular, same pixel density. I prefer it to be a little bit bigger, so I'm going to go to 32 pixels. We're going to not click compress texture. So what this will do is it will move around your texture faces and you won't know anything. You won't know where anything is because it'll just be a bunch of random cubes. If you are just going to paint and color within CPM, you are absolutely free to keep this. I personally don't like it like that. I don't like having my textures all over the place. Keep multi-texture occupancy. So what this is, we're going to keep this clicked. We're going to want to keep that one. The reason why is because we've modeled our horns and ears to have different shapes but similar sizes. Some of them are going to take the same texture. Worst case scenario, we will just move the UV. But we're going to keep that clicked for now. You can unclick it. You may have a lot of excess textures, but if we want our horns to pull from the same texture, we're just going to keep with the one UV. You can click padding. It allows for textures to have a little bit of room around them. Typically, I don't, so we're just going to hit confirm. So we have this now. We have our texture file right here. And as you can see, it has adjusted all of the things we have modeled to have a texture on them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit save. And we're going to save this as, just for now, as texture, because you will eventually run as this. If you just save it as texture, you can hit yes. The reason for this is that any texture we're making has to go onto our CPM file that we've made. I'm going to go into our external image software. For me, it's Medibang. I'm going to grab this texture, going to paste it in here. And admittedly, sometimes you're going to have to move things around once they're in here. The reason for this is that the auto-generated textures are not going to care about the texture you've already made. They're just going to care for making sure that the texture they made can fit. So you may have to rearrange a few things. Overall, everything should be able to just fit on the one piece. Save this. Hit OK. So something else I just gleaned over. we edited and adjusted this. As you can see, our CPM file right here that we opened up on Medibang or whatever image program, it does not have those edited textures. So what we need to make sure we do, one, we're going to make sure we copy this layer that we just made. We're going to close this and we're going to hit save. We got to make sure we save our image files. Always make sure you're saving. We're going to open recent file and then we're going to put that in. And now we click here, going to make sure we go back to this. We can delete this because now all of our textures are here. Before we do anything, we got to select everything we modeled as well. We got to go to UV. We got a UV mode per face UV. This is going to be important if you're doing the HD textures like I've done. So now we're going to turn on our mirror modeling and we are going to take this. We're going to select all of the UV up here. We're going to go to texture, go to here. We're going to bring this over to any of these. Now here's my trick for figuring out which one of these cubes is going to apply to whatever texture we've done. If you line it up with the left edge of the green cube, if it lines up perfectly with the right edge of the white cube right here, that means that if you double it in size, it'll fit perfectly, which means we'll be able to fit that HD texture in. We just got to go back and place our textures. So something else I want to mention while we're doing this is that if we have our UV face right here, if we want to make it bigger, we're not going to click from here because that means that all of our textures are going to get very wonky if we adjust like this. They're going to overlap each other. Anytime you're making a texture bigger, you always go from this gray arrow right here. So that'll enlarge them together within that same ratio together. Also, when you're on your UV face here, if you pop it out like this, what you can do, if you hold down Control, it allows you to zoom in and out. Regular zoom is up and down, hold Shift is left and right. You can also right click and reset zoom. This is also one of those moments where we have a texture that's overlapping because they were the same size. So we're just going to bring this down here. We're going to go to Paint, and what you can do, if this is something you want to have full, you can go to Element, make like a random color that you know stands out, and just click it, and that'll give you that UV face for what you're making. And since I know these are going to be earrings, still kind of transparent, and as you can see, that's my little trick to make the earrings look like hoops. So I'm going to finish placing some UVs, and I'll come back to you. One last quick thing I want to mention is that anytime you do a flat texture like this, I highly recommend always putting it in a space like this. As you can see, sometimes with rendering textures, we get this weird bit where it's connecting with another texture. We're getting just a tiny little bit of cross-hatching with this texture, tiny bit there. So to avoid that for this texture, we're going to give any 2D texture we're going to draw, we're going to give that some padding. Typically to avoid that, that's why we have the padding texture, like the padding option when creating a texture, but I typically only do that for 2D pieces. Alrighty, our UVs are placed back in place. We have everything all back and set, so the next part of this project is texturing. The only sort of advice that I can give with texturing is just keep in mind where shadows are. I can't really teach you how to texture. One thing that always typically looks good that I try and do with all my projects is that you want to do a little bit of hue adjustment every time that you're moving something. Once you get darker in, you want to go a little bit darker in color. Typically, purple is the color you want to move towards when you're trying to get darker, and yellow is the color you want to move towards when you're getting lighter. What I mean by this is, if you can see in action with this jacket here, our darkest spot is right here in the blue. And when we make it lighter, we shift it up a little bit. So comparatively, there's a very big difference between our lightest color and our darkest color. It adds a little bit of tone variation, makes your skin and model looks a little bit more visually interesting, and makes it a little more fun to look at. So I'm gonna let a little more time lapse go. We're just gonna go and texture things. So I will be back when that's all done. So we officially have our ears, we have our horns, we have our tail, and we have our little mask. So our next part that we're going to move on to It's just one last step to make this look nice, to look complete and finished. So we gotta animate this. And this is where things get a little scary. And I know that if you've never animated before, I understand. I'm also not an animator, so a lot of this is new to me. But I'm learning things as we go, and hopefully I can impart some of that knowledge to you. So when we are making any sort of animation, we gotta make sure, as you can see here, this is why we have our folders the way they are. Because this is like one big joint, smaller joint, like that. Because the tail, whenever it moves, it's gonna move a bit like a pendulum. I want you to keep the visual of like a pendulum in mind, because that's gonna be really important for what we're gonna do when it comes to animation. So what we're first gonna do is we're gonna set up a global animation. We're gonna make sure that this loops, and we want it to be a global animation. We're gonna set this to idle. I also recommend making this additive, and we're just gonna set it at priority 0. For our idle animation, I usually set this at 2 seconds. This is a keyframe. This will be basically telling us where in this action of the animation do we want this to be set up. So we want one keyframe here and one keyframe at 2 seconds. I'm also going to set one at 1 and 0.5 and 1.5. We're going to move this just a little bit, rotate it just a bit so we get a little bit of animation, a little bit of movement like that. Now, as you probably noticed, this is really stiff. Aside from we haven't animated the rest of the tail, it's kind of like this very jerky motion where it's not super flowy. And most animal tails in movement we see are very swishy, very flowy. They have a very rounded movement. So how we do this is we're gonna hit Control A, select all of our keyframes. We're gonna go over to this side. We're gonna hit, instead of linear for our interpolation, we're gonna hit Bezier. This will change it so that we have a little bit of a curve here. This will allow us to control how our tail will move. For me, what I do, I select the first and the last one by holding Control, and I pull it so that we have this lining up, this little like control line. I don't know the technical phrase for it, but the little control line lining up with the curve of how this is going. And then the center one, we're also going to do that. For the idle one, I don't tend to adjust either of these. We have a little bit more of a smooth motion with our tail. So now we're going to go to tail 2. We're going to do the exact same thing, but we're not going to do it in the exact keyframe positions that we did last time, because how that ends up looking is that it looks a little bit unnatural. I mentioned that a tail moves like a pendulum. And when you have a pendulum, hopefully I have a visual on screen right now, but you have a pendulum, you see that things move as like a wave, right? So if we're moving this here, if this is the height of where, if 0.5 is the height of where it's moving to this side, to the right, if we have a pendulum where it's lagging behind, 1 is going to be where this side is going to wag to the side. And then 0 is going to be our left. So we always want it to be 1 keyframe up, 1 keyframe down. Hit Control A, Bezier, gonna adjust these two to be like this. And as you can see, we're already getting kind of that pendulum moment with our movement with our tail, all right? Our last one we're gonna do is tail 3. Gonna set our keyframes, just to double check. 1 is our top of where our highest point in the curve. So for this one, our highest point in the curve will be 0.5. So now if we hit play, go back to 0, you can see it has a little bit more of like a casual sort of motion where you kind of expect the tail to move like that. So now that we have that done, what we're gonna do is we're gonna duplicate this by hitting Control D and hit Properties. We're gonna change this to walk, and we're gonna change this to our walking animation. Where is it? There it is. And we're gonna change this priority 1. So what is this gonna do? Why did we duplicate this? You're probably asking what happened. So why are we duplicating this? What we're doing is we are just gonna make sure that basically when we're walking, we're setting it up so that it's coded so that this movement gets exaggerated, because it will be going off of the idle animation and the walk animation. For example, if at this point our highest point is 5, since it's 5 on both idle and walk, since this is set to an additive animation, it'll go at its highest point to be 10 on these. So just as an example for what it will look like in game as a bit, it will move a lot more. We'll have a lot more motion. I'm gonna reset that, and then add a new animation. We're gonna loop. We're gonna go to running. We're gonna change this to run, and we're gonna hit this to priority 2. So for run, I don't duplicate the animation. That's because when we're running, you often see like If we're talking like cheetahs or cats, you see sometimes that their tail when running will bob up and down in an upward wave motion. So less of moving side to side, we just want it to move up and down. When we're running also, our legs are gonna come up further back. So we wanna make sure the tail is further up to kind of emulate that same motion. So then all we're gonna do, keyframe, go to keyframe 2. So that way we get this sort of motion. So then we're gonna do that same sort of thing on these. For me, when it comes to running, I like to exaggerate on these a little more. So if I usually go to the same number of I change by 7.5 on both of these. For this, I may change by 10 or 12, possibly. It just depends on what I think looks good. We're gonna follow the same pendulum motion. So if this is our bottom, 1 is going to be our lowest point in this one. And I honestly just recommend playing the animation, seeing if you like it, how it bounces. For me, I want it to do a lot more. So then we get a bigger bounce motion. I'm going to take our high points and low points in this curve. For this one, I'm going to stretch them out a bit, because I want those to kind of last a bit longer and kind of ease in a little bit more. Alright, so then finally, we're going to do this edge of the tail. We have a little running motion. So honestly, when I'm modeling, I tend to just do these 3. Sometimes I'll do a sleep animation because, like, the idle's like this, and so sometimes it's fun to adjust where your tail is when it's sleeping. But most of the times, I'll just leave it like this. What we're gonna do next is we are going to take our model that we've done, we're gonna save our CPM image, and we are going to export this as a CPM. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to File, we're going to hit Export, hit Customizable Player Model Project, and we're going to go into whatever folder you're storing your models. For me, I have a specific models folder. That's where I keep everything, and I'm going to save this as Sukaku. I have that as a CPM project. In my last video, I had people ask if there's any way to open a CPM project into Blockbench. The answer is yes. So what we can do, just for example, we're going to hit File, we're going to open Customizable Player Models Project. We're going to locate that model file. I'm gonna go and find a model that I made before just to show you that it can be anything. And you can open it just as is in the project. Do know that sometimes the cubes are gonna be weird because they're gonna be individually put into a folder. So sometimes it's gonna be a bit weird, I will be honest. So if we're opening anything with animations, we are just gonna hit keep on this because the animation importer is in beta, just gonna hit keep. I want you to see what happens. You go to animation, it's all gone. It's admittedly very finicky. Sometimes it will be there, and then if you animate it with a Bezier curve, it's not gonna show up, and it's gonna be weird, and it's gonna be very clunky. So I want you to know that if you are importing anything as a CPM project into Blockbench, it will be odd. You may have to readjust some things. So what we're gonna do, now that we have imported this, well, we have exported the CPM project, we're going to open this up on Minecraft. So, now that we are in with Minecraft, this is a Minecraft launcher called Modrinth. Basically, it works kind of like CurseForge. If you don't know what either of those are, it is a mod loader for Minecraft where you just throw in the mods you want. It adds in any prerequisites. It makes modding a lot easier from when I was growing up. But what we do, we open up an instance that has the Customizable Player Models mod in there. I'm not going to show you how to do this. If you're going through a tutorial on how to use CPM and Blockbench, I'm going to assume you know how to download mods. So we're going to just load up our Minecraft. Now that we have Minecraft open, we're going to hit this button up here, up top, for Skin Editor. It may say you have new versions, GUI scale's too big. Currently, we don't need to worry about any of those because we're not using the in-game editor. So what we're going to do is, now that we have all this, we're going to locate our files for this Minecraft instance. The easiest way to do this is we're going to go to Options, Resource Pack, Open Pack folder. So what we're going to do from here is we're going to hit back. This will probably be .minecraft if you're just in plain Minecraft. If you're in a mod loader, it'll be the name of the mod loader. So what you're going to do is in here, you're going to make a file folder called player_models. And in here, in this folder is where we are going to put the CPM project we just made. So we're going to go back and relocate where we saved that. Copy, gonna hit paste. We're going to go File, Load, Player Models, and we're going to locate Sukaku. as the one I just made. All right, so this will be all loaded in. What we're gonna do from here, we're gonna hit export. We're gonna hit slim, since this is the model it is. So if you want to also change your vanilla skin to match whatever model you're doing, because as you can see, the skin I have on right now doesn't match the skin for the model, what we're going to do is hit change vanilla skin. Before we can do that, we first have to put the skin file we want into this player_models folder. So I'm going to copy the skin I have, paste it in here. We're going to change vanilla skin. I'm going to select Sokaku, select skin. We are going to click none of this. We're going to export and upload. Basically, just telling you, it will adjust your current Minecraft skin if you're doing that. So you can upload. We're going to upload to the paste site. So what this does is the creator of the mod, Tom, has a public paste site where basically it will export the skin model, source it on there, and anyone who has access to the site, which is publicly, anyone can have their model stored on there. You can have up to 15 on there until you have to adjust and edit what you have. So we're going to hit OK. If you have a model you have already loaded in game, like say you close it and you want to reopen the model you have, you don't have to do that process again. What you can do is you can hit open recent and you'll have a list of all the different models you have. Typically, it'll just be the one. Something also you may want to have in the future is to understand where you can adjust what's in your paste site. So what we're going to do is hit edit. We're going to hit pastes. This is going to have all of the pastes we have. So this is going to have every single model you've done. Typically, you're going to want to delete them after a while if you're not using them. This is just to save some space. So now that we have this, we're going to hit file, save, and then we are going to hit test in game. I'm going to open up here. So now that we are in Minecraft, I'm going to hit F5, and as you will see, we have our Minecraft skin on. We have our idle animation working, as you can see with the tail. If we move a little bit more with our walking, it'll move just a little bit more, and then if we start running, our tail will move up and down like that. And there we go. So that's our model working in game. I think it came out pretty good. If you guys want, you can also tag me on Twitter. If you've done this tutorial, you can @ me @nullified. If you've done any of these tutorials, if you have any models you want to show, or you're having any issues, you are free to @ me on Twitter and ask me about this. I'll hopefully be able to get back to you really soon and give you a little bit more in-depth with pictures and everything. But for now, I hope you enjoyed. I had a lot of fun with this. If you have any more questions, anything that wasn't answered in this video, leave it in a comment below. I will see if I can get to it and explain it. Worst case scenario, if we need to, I can make another follow-up tutorial if we need any more instruction on other things with CPM. Current things that I'm working on and investigating are toggleable models, because in this game there is a gestures menu that's a part of customizable player models that can help you change your model in game. That's something I still admittedly have to do a lot more research on. So before I can actually explain that to you, I have to understand it myself. So once I get that figured out, I can probably do a video discussing how the gestures menu works and possibly how to have different models that you can toggle like that. I'm working on learning how to have a model that you can toggle with something like a mermaid tail, or toggle to have completely different form, like say you're a cat girl that can turn into a cat. I'm working on figuring out how those sorts of models work. So apologies for not knowing exactly how they work right now, but hopefully I'll get to you soon if we can make some sort of follow-up video or maybe a small little post. But thank you for tuning in. I hope this tutorial was very helpful. I'm trying to make it as streamlined as it can. I know how annoying certain tutorials can be if they just yammer on and on and on, and that's why I'm yammering at the end. So I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like, consider subscribing, and I hope this was very informative. Have fun learning!